Why did almost every one of Jesus' apostles die a martyr's death? And why was John the only one who lived to old age? This isn't just a historical question. It's a question about truth, courage, and the power of faith. By the end of this video, you'll see how their lives and their deaths still speak loudly to us today. When Jesus first called his disciples, they were ordinary men, fishermen, tax collectors, and even zealots. They weren't trained leaders, soldiers, or kings. And yet, after Jesus' resurrection and ascension, these same men spread his message across the world, even though it meant they would face prison, torture, and death. Let's walk through their stories, one by one. Peter, the bold leader who once denied Jesus 3 times, and his life in Rome. Tradition tells us that under Emperor Nero's persecution, Peter was condemned to die by crucifixion. But Peter made one last request. He asked to be crucified upside down, saying he was unworthy to die in the same way as his Lord. Think about that. The same man who ran from a servant girl at fire now faced death with courage. His life proves what happens when Christ transforms fear into faith. Andrew, Peter's brother, carried the gospel to regions like Greece and Scythia when he was arrested for preaching Christ. He was sentenced to die on an X-shaped cross. But unlike others, Andrew wasn't nailed. He was tied with ropes to prolong his agony. And yet as he hung there, witnesses recorded that Andrew preached to crowds for 2 whole days until he died. Even in suffering, he saw it as a chance to proclaim the hope of Christ. James, the brother John and part of Jesus' inner circle, was the first apostle to be martyred. In Acts chapter 12, we read that King Herod Agrippa put him to death by the sword. His early death shocked the church, but it also strengthened them. His willingness to die showed believers that the gospel was worth more than life itself. And then there was John, James's brother. Unlike the others, John wasn't killed. But that doesn't mean his life was easy. Tradition says he was thrown into boiling oil in Rome, but miraculously survived. Later, he was exiled to the island of Patmos. Alone and cut off, John received a revelation. The vision of Christ as the Alpha and Omega, the victorious king who would one day return. John lived to old age, writing the Gospel of John, 3 letters, and Revelation. God preserved him, not for comfort, but to deliver hope to the church. Philip traveled to Asia Minor and preached in places like Hierapolis. There he was scourged, imprisoned, and eventually crucified. His faith did not waver, and his witness turned many to Christ, even in his final moments. Bartholomew, also known as Nathaniel, took the gospel far east, to India and Armenia. Some accounts say he was beaten and flayed alive before being crucified. His brutal death may sound horrific, but it testifies to his unwavering commitment. The one who once confessed, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God," never took those words back, even when it cost him everything. Thomas is often remembered as Doubting Thomas. But his life ended as anything but doubtful after encountering the risen Christ. Thomas carried the gospel to India. There, he founded churches that still exist to this day. In the end, he was pierced through with spears for his faith. The man who once said, "Unless I see, I will not believe," gave his life because he knew without question that Christ had risen. Matthew, the tax collector turned disciple, wrote the gospel that bears his name. He carried the message to Ethiopia, where he was stabbed to death while celebrating the Lord's Supper. The one once despised as a traitor became a bold witness, proving that no one is beyond the reach of Christ's call. James the Less, son of Alphaeus, became a leader of the Jerusalem church. He was known for his wisdom and devotion to prayer, but his leadership made him a target. He was beaten, stoned, and finally struck down with a club. His life ended violently, but his faith left a lasting impact on the early church. Thaddeus, also called Jude, preached in places like Syria and Persia. Tradition says he was beaten to death with sticks and spears for his testimony. His faith cost him his life, but his message still echoes through a short letter in the New Testament, where he urges believers to contend for faith. Simon the Zealot, once a revolutionary eager for earthly rebellion, became a revolutionary for Christ's kingdom. He carried the gospel to Persia and was eventually killed for it. His life reminds us that zeal for worldly power cannot compare to zeal for God's truth. Now pause for a moment and think, Nearly every one of these men met a violent death. Couldn't they have avoided it? Couldn't they have just stayed silent? People sometimes die for lies, yes, but not for lies they know are lies. These apostles didn't die for something they hoped was true. They died for what they had seen with their own eyes, the risen Christ. Imagine if the resurrection was a hoax. Sooner or later, one of them would have cracked under torture. One of them would have admitted it was made up, but not one of them recanted. Not one denied what they had witnessed. Their courage, even in the face of death, is some of the strongest evidence that the resurrection truly happened. But what about John? Why was he the only one spared? Some believe God preserved him as a living witness, to remind the church that his plan includes both suffering and endurance. Through John, we receive not only the gospel but also Revelation, a book of hope that has encouraged believers through every age of persecution. John's survival wasn't about escaping suffering. It was about extending the testimony. So, why did every apostle except John die a martyr? Because they believed Jesus was alive, and nothing, not prison, not torture, not death, could shake that truth. Their blood became the seed of the church. Their sacrifice spread the gospel farther than their lives ever could. And what does this mean for us? First, it means our faith is not built on myths or legends. It is built on eyewitnesses who were willing to die rather than deny what they saw. Second, it reminds us that following Jesus has always required courage. Christianity is not a promise of comfort. It is a call to carry the cross. And third, it gives us hope. If Christ has strengthened ordinary men to endure such trials, he can strengthen us too. The apostles didn't die for power, money, or fame. They died for Christ. And John's survival proves that God always keeps a witness alive, so that the story continues. Their lives and deaths ask us a question today. If they were willing to give everything for Christ, how much are we willing to give? If this story opened your eyes, don't stop here. Like, share, and subscribe for more messages like this. Tell me in the comments which apostle's story challenges you the most. I'd love to hear from you. And remember this, people may try to silence the gospel, but the truth of Jesus Christ never dies. The apostles are gone, but their witness still lives on. And now, it's our turn to carry the message forward.